Okay, let's get started. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this fantastic event that's going to be speaking about the U.S. Foreign Service Internship and Harriman Fellowship Information Session. We have an outstanding agenda for you all today. This event is made possible in collaboration between the Office of Career Development and Professional Engagement and the Reeves Center for International Studies. Our agenda today is going to include an information sharing from the State Department, who will be talking about State Department internships from our diplomat in residence, Stephanie Hutchinson, followed by an update on the Harriman Fellowship that Dianne Alleman will be presenting, followed with a panel discussion with Ms. Hutchinson and two other panelists who have been Harriman Fellows. So we are so excited to have everybody here. If you have questions, please feel free to put those questions in the chat. Don't wait to ask your question. Just go ahead and plug it in there. We'll be sure it gets answered. Or you can certainly wait to ask your question and to unmute yourselves at the time of the Q&A. So without further ado, I'm going to kick things over to Stephanie. Stephanie is our diplomat in residence with the U.S. Department of State, and she has around 18 years of experience working as a Foreign Service officer in the economic track as an economic officer. And I'm just so grateful for her to be here as well as the others. So Stephanie, take it away.
Thank you so much, Andrew. It's a pleasure to be here today and talk to William & Mary students. I'm really thrilled. I was up on campus last semester, and so great to be reconnecting today. Just before I forget, because I will, is I dropped a link in the chat. So for those of you who are interested in keeping in touch and getting notifications of internship deadlines and our webinars on careers at State Department, I've dropped a link in the chat for you to be able to register for our talent network. So without any further administrative announcements, I am going to share my screen here with you and do a quick presentation. I promise not to spend too much time on PowerPoint, but do want to highlight a few things. And so I think the first thing I'll do is just tell you a little bit about myself and how I got here. I was in the private sector before joining the Foreign Service. I wasn't sure government service was for me. I was seeking more international work after having been focused on market research in the IT sector and went back to grad school. I'm just going to pause there and let you know that you don't need a master's degree to join the Foreign Service as a Foreign Service generalist, and most of our Foreign Service specialists don't require that either. But I did choose that pathway. And then after that, a lot of my friends went into the Foreign Service, and I was still looking for different opportunities. But one day I was on a consulting project in Syria before the civil war there. And that's when I realized that what I wanted to be doing was having an impact overseas and working for my own government. So that's when I applied to the Foreign Service. Since then, I've served in Trinidad and Tobago as an economic officer, but also doing my consular service, issuing visas and supporting American services. I worked as a political officer in Tanzania, so a little bit outside my quote unquote area of expertise, but one of the most fascinating and rewarding tours that I've ever had. Then back to Washington to understand how everything works, from the interagency process to how we brief principals, and then discovered energy policy and really enjoyed working on energy issues. So went to Morocco and spent 3 years there, not solely, but largely working on climate and energy policy issues. And then my last two tours, one was in Portugal, the other one is Ghana, and now here I am working as a recruiter for the State Department. So something completely outside anything I've ever done before. And that is, in large part, the best thing about the Foreign Service is that developing new skill sets, you can transition and pivot to different areas, and you're always picking up a new tool for your toolkit. So that's been my path. And now I will sort of transition to just sort of some general facts about the State Department. I'm sure you are all aware about what we do and how we do it, but just to give you a sense, we're about 70,000 employees. That includes our local staff at embassies overseas who are critical to our operation. We are the lead federal agency on foreign policy overseas. So what that means is we are out there supporting U.S. citizens who are traveling, losing a passport, or in distress if there's a natural disaster. We're advocating for U.S. businesses. We're also advocating for U.S. policy positions, whether that's on something related to human rights, something related to nuclear nonproliferation, or a trade matter. So there's lots that goes into what we do, and there are lots of people behind the scenes that make that all happen. All right, so where are we? We're around the world, 200 embassies and consulates, but also in Washington, D.C. We also have passport offices around the country, and our diplomatic security services have offices, regional offices in many states. This is not because I think you can read all of this in a short period of time, but just to give you a sense for the breadth and depth of what we do at the State Department. I always ask people, I'm sure I can, match you with an office in the State Department where you would be really thrilled to work. Because we do so much. The issues we cover are vast and growing. Now we have a new bureau dedicated to public health diplomacy. We have one that focuses on digital issues. But we also have people focused on operations, our IT support systems and networks. We have human resource officers, financial managers. So lots goes into what we do from Washington and overseas. Here, just a quick snapshot of an embassy. It's led by an ambassador and a deputy chief of mission, but there's sections beneath them that do and support all of their work and the work of the mission and advance U.S. policy. So those mirror some of the career tracks that we have in the Foreign Service. Management, our consular section, public diplomacy, economic and political affairs, our regional security office, as well as the whole interagency. So an embassy is sort of like a microcosm of Washington, D.C., depending on where you're serving. So how can you get involved in diplomacy? I'm going to focus on the top bullet, the internships for now, but I want you to be aware that, of course, we have career tracks for when you're ready. Foreign Service generalists like me, we come in sort of 5 flavors, if you will, or 5 tracks that we can pursue. Management, consular public diplomacy, political and economics, or mirroring those sections that I mentioned within the embassy. We also have specialists. So I came in as a generalist. I need to have a base skill set and what we call the dimensions, be strong in the dimensions: leadership, cultural adaptability, communication, and a number of others. But Foreign Service specialists not only have to be adept at all of that, they have to come in with an actual skill. So IT skills they might have, or security background, or engineering, maybe a human resource background. So we have people who have are dedicated in those career tracks. We also have a Consular Fellows program. It's a 5-year non-career limited appointment to serve as a consular officer overseas. So it gives you a taste of what Foreign Service life would be like. And we are looking for people who speak Arabic, Mandarin, Chinese, Portuguese, and Spanish as well. Then, as I mentioned, you don't need a graduate degree to join the Foreign Service, but if you're interested in getting one, consider one of our fellowships that will help you pay for them. Just quickly, Pickering, Rangel, Clark, and the Foreign Affairs IT Fellowship are all State Department sponsored opportunities. And then finally, and it's not last, and definitely not least, but the civil service, these are our colleagues in Washington who tend to be subject matter experts and work on issues day in, day out, and are really the individuals that we, the generalists, go to help advance our policy overseas. Okay, so the student internship program. So this is a great opportunity. It runs summer, spring, or fall. You could serve at the State Department or overseas, possibly. The duties of the internship programs are the same. I'll mention a few other internship programs we have in a minute, but duties can range from assisting with big events and meetings. So, for example, the interns this summer in Washington, they helped organize a big conference for all the ambassadors from around the world. So they got to mix and mingle with the ambassadors and support them. They also actually got sworn in by the secretary, which is really cool. If you're overseas and you might be there during a big visit, especially some locations where the Harriman fellowship is, you might have a VIP visitor. Maybe it's a VVIP visitor like the president, and you might be able to contribute to that. You may also be helping us to draft the many memos and talking points and cables that we write to either, if you're overseas, informing Washington of what's going on in your host country, or if you're in Washington, making sure that your boss knows what to say to his foreign interlocutor about a particular policy issue. You might also be doing something operational. There are lots of interns that work for us in our IT section or in our human resources section, like I'm in, and they're very valued and get similar opportunities. Our internships are paid. Our in-person internships are paid. You're paid about $18 an hour. You'll also have support for your travel and for securing housing. It's particularly valuable in Washington, D.C. All right, so eligibility, rising juniors and seniors are eligible for this program. So you want to start applying when you're a sophomore. You need to have a GPA of 3.2 or higher. You must also qualify for a security clearance, and you must be returning to school in the fall. And then this is how to apply. I don't expect anybody to be able to, take all this in. We're going to make sure you get these slides. But I will just say that one of the things I wanted to highlight from this slide is that, the committee selects primaries and alternates. And now you may think, oh, I'm an alternate. No, yay, you're an alternate. Congratulations, you're an alternate. That is a huge achievement. Okay, number one, huge achievement. Number two, go through, don't think, oh, I'm not going to do it. Go through with the security clearance process. I really recommend that. Lots happens between the time that we invite people as primary and alternates. And, there's always the chance, I can't guarantee it, but I think a lot happens in the months after individuals are selected. So you should definitely follow through on that. And again, like I said, it's a huge accomplishment to be chosen as an alternate. All right, so our other internship programs, some of the same things that I've already said apply, but I just want to highlight two other programs. One is the U.S. Foreign Service Internship Program. It is 2 summers in a row, 1 domestic, 1 overseas, again, for rising juniors and seniors with a 3.2 grade point average. In addition to being merit-based, it is also need-based. So you do need to demonstrate financial need in your application. It doesn't necessarily have to be FAFSA or other government type paperwork. It can be other means to demonstrate that. Just to be aware, so for the Foreign Service Internship Program, if you're interested in that, it's going to open soon, late August, I think next week or the week after. So keep a watch for that. The next application cycle for the Student Internship Program will be in October. So keep a watch for that, and that will be for summer 2025. All right, and then perhaps my favorite program is the Virtual Student Federal Service Program. Now, I will say that it is not paid, and I'm sorry about that, but it is a virtual program. You can do it for anywhere in the world. So if you're studying abroad, you can still participate. 10 hours a week, working with an office, a bureau, an embassy, and the State Department. What I love about this is that you can go on the platform, and if you're really passionate about a particular issue, you can search and see if there's an internship that matches that, because we as hiring managers have to put in detailed information about what we would like our interns to help us with. So it's a really cool program. It helps you build your network and gives you a little bit of experience. And I will say it's not just the State Department, it's federal government wide. So you may find some other opportunities in there. All right, so I am a resource for you if you live in North Carolina and Virginia and elsewhere too. Always happy to talk to students or individuals from anywhere in the country. But we have 17 diplomats in residence all throughout the country. If you move and 10 years from now or 5 years from now, you decide you want to apply to the State Department, contact your diplomat in residence. They'll be happy to talk to you, and you can find a list on our website. And then finally, join our talent network. I already put one plug in there for you for that, but you either click the link in the chat or scan this QR code and make sure to keep up to date with our opportunities. And then finally, you can always email me, and I'll put this in the chat too, diplomat in resident, dir@midatlantic@state.gov, with any questions or if you want to set up a time to chat. And I'll leave it there. I look forward to the discussion.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dianne Alleman. I work at the Reeves Center for International Studies, and I serve as a liaison to the Harriman Fellowship Board. So that's what I want to talk to you a little bit about today, the Harriman Fellowship. So the College of William and Mary established the Harriman Fellowship along with numerous friends of Ambassador Pamela Harriman. Lots of people contributed toward this program. It started over 20 years ago, around 2000. And since that time, there have been a number of Harriman Fellows, and this is a national competition. So these are not all William and Mary students. However, the two wonderful former Harriman Fellows you're going to meet in a little bit, Liz Grimm and Ben and Holly, are both William and Mary alumni. So that's kind of cool. Liz was one of the first fellows, I believe 2001, yes. And Bennett was just fairly recently in 2022. So, or was it 21? 21. Anyway, sorry. They're going to be able to talk a lot about their experience and the value of the Harriman Fellowship. The Harriman Fellowship does offer a financial award of around $5,000. For many years, until recently, that money was intended to help with travel expenses because until a few years ago, the State Department internships were not paid. It's a wonderful, wonderful thing that now they are. So we've had to change the way this will be handled. Going forward, the Harriman Fellowship will be actually awarded after you complete your internship. And the money will go toward something you imagine and propose to the Harriman board and to our office. It could be a conference, it could be international travel, it could be research, something that would lead to more depth and development for your interest in a career in public service. Now, let me back up just real briefly and tell you who Ambassador Pamela Harriman was and why there is a fellowship in her name. Ambassador Harriman served in Paris. She was appointed by Bill Clinton when he became president in 1993. She actually had been a very big mover and shaker in the Democratic Party for years. And she was part of Democrats for the 80s, which really helped to get him nominated and then elected. So she was very, very involved, but becoming an ambassador was a wonderful fit for her. She was a wonderful, charming, intelligent, interested person. And she was especially passionate about young people, which is why this particular program is so great in honoring her, because she would have been so excited. And her grandchildren, who are part of our board, that they have mentioned this a number of times in the past, that their grandmother really would have been thrilled to see all the young people that have been supported through this. Pamela Harriman was involved also at William and Mary. She was on our board of visitors. She was a Charter Day speaker. She established a professorship in the government department, and she also helped to establish our child care center, which I think is really wonderful and fascinating. So that's just a little bit about her. As we've changed our program a bit, we are now focusing on the U.S. Foreign Service internship program, which Stephanie just mentioned to you. That's the 2-year program. And as a result, we want to really encourage you to consider applying for that program. It's wonderful in that you spend 1 year in the State Department, 1 summer, I should say, in the State Department, and then you get sent to an international consulate or embassy during the second summer. And so that's a great opportunity for the program. And as Stephanie also mentioned, yes, the application opens within a week or so. So please keep your eye on that State Department Talent Network. They'll put you on an email list and then you'll get notified, or you can just keep checking the website, keep your eye out. That's a good thing. The other thing I would mention is that part of the endowment says that there is at least 1 William and Mary student awarded each year. So some years, like this year, there is no William and Mary student in this U.S. Foreign Service internship program. So we will be looking for a Harriman Fellow among the regular population student internship program this year. So either way, we would love to hear from you. We want to know if you get an internship. Please contact our office. Let us know. Let Andrew Martin know. And we would really love to give you the opportunity to apply for a Harriman Fellowship. Just another plug for Andrew in the Career Center. I know he has worked with many students to help them with their resumes, with their applications, with all of that process. So please reach out to Andrew. Look at him. He's very friendly. He would be very wonderful to help you and is a wonderful resource. I am always here. Contact me via my email. I will put it in the chat. We really want William and Mary students to be involved, and we really want them to have the great experience at the State Department. You're the leaders of the future, and we want to do everything we can to get you where you need to be. I'm going to stop talking now because I feel like what's most important is for you to hear from our former Harriman Fellows and from Stephanie. So I'm going to turn it over now to Tyler, and to them, they're going to do question and answer. And if you have questions, be thinking about them so that you can propose them here in a few minutes. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Diane. So my name is Tyler Lawrence. I'm the International Events Manager at the Reeves Center for International Studies. And I get the privilege of chatting with these three today. After this, we're going to open up for a Q&A. So if you have any questions, please feel free to raise your hands or put your questions in the chat. We'll try and answer as many as possible. Also, if you feel comfortable, please turn on your cameras. We love to see you guys when we have a conversation with you. So you've already gotten the chance to meet Stephanie, but now we want to meet the other two. So Liz, can you please just tell us who you are and what you do for work? And then also when you were a State Department intern and a Harriman Fellow, where that was and what you did.
Of course. Thank you so much, Tyler. And I just want to add my voice to the chorus of those. Thank you to Diane for the extraordinary work that you do. Thank you to Tyler for setting this up. Forums like this, I think, are so important just to give students information and access. First of all, also before I say anything else, having taught many years over Zoom, shouting into the Zoom void, it evokes a deep visceral feeling in me. So please do turn your cameras on. Katie, Morris, and Isabel, just for the record, I would hire y'all tomorrow. Thank you for turning your cameras on. I see you. Just wanted to note that. So just as Tyler said, so my name is Dr. Elizabeth Grimm. I graduated from William & Mary in 2002, and Diane's excellent memory was right. I was the second class of Harriman Fellows in 2001. So my original placement was in Paris. I was placed in the Diplomatic Security Office, and Stephanie went through a little org chart of what happens at the embassy. And so I know you're all paying attention. I also know it's August. Who would like to remind me what happens in the Diplomatic Security Office? And if you don't volunteer, y'all, I'm a professor, so I'll just call on you. Colin? Colin's like, maybe I shouldn't have turned my camera on. That was a life mistake that I've made today. Do you remember what they do in DS in the embassy?
I think that might have been a mistake to turn my camera on because I'm not.
And I respect honesty. I wouldn't overthink it, right? So like many things in state, the name will tell you the answer. So as Stephanie said, embassies they're living organisms. They're an entire microcosm of the world. And so diplomatic security is charged with the security of the embassy, right? So it is all about protecting the actual residences. It's about protecting the embassy infrastructure itself, the individuals who work there. As I'm happy to talk about in the Q&A, this placement was literally a life-changing trajectory for me. So I was supposed to be assigned to the ambassador's office. This is the summer of 2001. I'm not going to ask if you all were born. I know the answer, and I'm not going to age myself. But the reality is that who was president in the summer of 2001, y'all? Colin's like, I know I'm not going to be called on twice. You will not. Who was president in the summer of 2001? Lily, if you're Googling it, I would also respect that. Are you Googling it? Lily, who was it? His dad was also president. He now paints like cat pictures. So President Bush had not yet named an ambassador. So I did not get placed in the ambassador's office because there was no ambassador. And so instead, I was placed in the regional security office. And I was tasked with helping to figure out infrastructure breaks, what were critical security failings in many of the apartments. I was tasked with doing a long-term research report on a threat that was talked about a lot in Europe, but was not talked a lot about in the United States, which was the threat of Al-Qaeda. And I gave that report to my office on my last day of my internship, which was August 11th, 2001. So a fairly prescient deep dive. After I came back, I graduated from William & Mary. I went to work at an agency called the National Security Agency that I'm happy to not talk about in Q&A, but I can tell you it's involved in code making and code breaking. After that, I went to work at the Office of Secretary of Defense under Donald Rumsfeld for a few years during the early years of the Iraq War. And then I worked for many years at the National Counterterrorism Center as a CIA person. Concurrent to that, I did my master's in security studies at GW and my PhD here at Georgetown. My current job, if any of you ever find yourselves in DC, is that I'm a professor in the security studies program at Georgetown. So we are right here, the sort of upper northwest corner of the city. And I guess I should say, to round up my bio, though I already feel like this is going on too long, if any of you are interested in the topics of terrorism and torture, My first book is on torture, and my second book is on terrorism. They are my two favorite things to talk about, and I teach classes in them at Georgetown. Too long, Tyler. It was a too long intro, but I'll turn it over. Should we introduce Bennett now? Yes?
Yeah. Bennett, so same question. Who are you and what was your State Department internship?
Hi, everyone. I'm Bennett. That was a hard intro to follow up, but I promise no pop quiz questions. So I graduated from William and Mary and the University of St. Andrews in 2023, where I studied international relations and science policy. I currently work at Booz Allen doing exercise planning, sort of in the realm of emergency management and national security. So still very much, at this intersection of international relations and environmental policy, which I find really quite interesting. I was a fellow in 2021 at US Embassy London. So this was a really cool fit where my degree was in both the US and the UK. And so being able to work on US UK relations while also kind of being a student was certainly a really awesome experience. At Embassy London, I was in the economics section and also sort of more specifically focused on the environmental science, technology, and health unit. And if you're sort of, thinking about what was happening in 2021, I mean, this was sort of, we were coming out of COVID, so reopening the US UK travel corridor was a top priority for us. But we also had some pretty cool events happening in the UK with the G7 in Cornwall and then COP26 happening later that fall. So when you're in that economic section or the ESTH section, I mean, it was a really, really cool place to be, sort of right in the center of all that, fun sort of high level visits and stuff like that. So I'll leave it there, but happy to dive into any of that further later in the questions.
Thank you, Bennett. So my first question is actually for Liz. Liz, you already touched on this some in your introduction, but how did your State Department internship and your Harriman Fellowship have an impact on your choice of career, and how did this help set you up for success in your career?
Tyler, I feel like I have said to both you and Diane this same story so many times, but it is so important to repeat. Truly being a Harriman Fellow changed the direction of my life. I mean, there are certain points when you can look back at those sort of critical junctures, those opportunities where you made one decision but could have easily made another. It was an absolute turning point. So let's take a step back, my friends. How many of you think that you would like to be a lawyer when you grow up? Or how many of you were told by your family members that you argue well and so you should be a lawyer? First of all, Madeline, I know that it is you. Let's just be right. Yes. No one's family told them that they were argumentative. Well, you know what? Next year on this call, Tyler, we'll invite my mother and she can chime in her 2 cents. So I was one of those kids in kindergarten that I was like, going to be a lawyer, going to be a lawyer. High school, going to be a lawyer, did mock trial. At William and Mary, same thing. And I had always thought that this would be the sort of predetermined path. After undergrad, I would go directly to law school. But the reality was working in the regional security office and particularly doing that deep dive into Al-Qaeda opened my mind up to a whole different world that I never imagined, an interest in security studies. My parents are pacifists. My dad went to grad school so he wouldn't have to fight in Vietnam. We never even had water guns in the house. So the fact that I went to work for the DoD is actually a source of deep sadness still for my 80-year-old mother. But the reality is I didn't know what security studies was. I didn't know what it meant. And so without this opportunity, I would have had a very, very different life. And so it is truly no exaggeration to say I completed this internship and it was earth-changing. It was fascinating and complex and confusing. Who becomes a terrorist? What motivates them? How do we de-radicalize? How do we combat terrorism effectively and comply with US and international laws? It was absolutely, absolutely life-changing. And so I think if I had a bottom line up front for this, it would be not to be so fixed in your plan or what you think your plans are going to look like that you miss out on other opportunities that are actually an incredible fit for both what the world needs, but also what your talents and interests are.
Thank you. All right, so my second question is for Bennett. Bennett, during your time in your internship and your fellowship, are there any connections that you made through these that you would not have otherwise been able to?
Yeah, I mean, just being sort of in London when you've got all these really amazing visits happening was truly incredible. I mean, we had secretaries from all over the interagency come to visit. Biden was visiting, Blinken was visiting. It was like, really, really dynamic time, and be able to interact with some of these senior leaders was really quite cool. Um, I think, as an intern at an embassy as large as Embassy London, there's like so many sort of detailees and attaches from across the whole interagency that are there as well. And so you're able to meet a lot of really interesting people with different backgrounds, different areas of focus, from the FBI to the Department of Energy to the Department of Agriculture. And you're able to get this pretty holistic sense of what all of the US government is doing in the UK, which goes a lot further than just sort of the State Department and just the Foreign Service. So I thought that perspective was really, really quite cool. On the UK side, I mean, it was amazing to meet with a whole range of current and former civil servants and politicians and academics who either were working with the embassy or sort of were, facilitated introductions through colleagues or members of the Harriman board. And so that was also really quite cool as well. And then outside of the realm of government, definitely bumped into quite a few celebrities. The highlight probably being Harrison Ford eating ice cream at the July 4, embassy party. So kind of a full range, but it was truly incredible. And I'm still in touch with some of my other Harriman fellows from that year, as well as interns from that year. And it's pretty exciting, especially when you get to continue to stay up to date and talk sort of US UK politics. So
That's great. And it's hard to beat Harrison Ford eating ice cream. So so Stephanie, Dianne talked a little bit about how the Harriman Fellowship's moving towards this US Foreign Service internship. What makes the US Foreign Service internship so unique from all the other internships?
Well, I think, all of our internship programs really, have the opportunity to absorb the rhythm tempo of the Foreign Service and the State Department and civil service work. So I think, they all offer that. What is very unique, I think, about the U.S. Foreign Service internship program is that you get the opportunity to spend 2 summers with the State Department, one in Washington, so you get to see how the big machine works, and then overseas. So you get to see that comparison. So I didn't know what the difference was until my third tour, and I came back to Washington, and I was like, wow, this building is mammoth, and I'm getting lost, and but wow, there's brilliant people here. And there are brilliant people overseas too, but it really strikes you when you're in that building. So I think, in Washington, you'll see how the policy is formulated, and overseas, you'll get to see how the policy is applied. And I think that is what's really cool about the U.S. Foreign Service internship program. And I think what a lot of us, and I'm a Foreign Service officer, so I talk a lot about that experience. But civil servants are amazing, so I don't mean to, but when you're overseas, you are touching and feeling the impact. You're involved in that impact. You can see it. It might be one person, it might be 10 people. Maybe if you're lucky, it's tens of thousands of people, but you really feel that impact. So you're going to have that opportunity not only to, as we like to say in the government, see how the sausage is made back in Washington, but you will be able to really see the impact of that when you're overseas. And I think that's the difference. I would also say that there is an orientation program for the U.S. Foreign Service internship program to really introduce them to the State Department when they first arrive, so that there's that. And there is also, some engagement and introduction to the Foreign Service officer test along the way as well. So you get a little bit more attention in the intervening time between the 2 sessions. But I think either internship allows for an amazing experience. So I would encourage students to apply to both.
Absolutely. Thank you. So Liz, as a member of the Harriman Fellowship Board, what does the board offer to students beyond just monetary support?
Oh my gosh. And I think Bennett can also speak to this. I cannot stress enough how much mentorship and guidance, and how by becoming a Harriman, you're not just representing Ambassador Harriman's legacy, but you are truly joining a community of like-minded individuals who are committed to doing good in the world, who are committed to solving problems. I am endlessly grateful to members of the Harriman board. When I first moved to DC right after I graduated, the Harriman board members were the first group of people that I reached out to, individuals like Janet Howard, who were really, really helpful in helping me navigate the city. And one of the first jobs, I should have mentioned this, that I had once I finished my PhD was actually teaching at William and Mary. So I taught for a year in the government department. The person who I had international relations with was the person who hired me, Professor Mike Tierney, who's an icon and a legend. And I kept my house in DC, and so I needed some place to live in Williamsburg. And a former board member who just passed away, Stuart Gamage, literally offered me her house rent-free to live in for a year, which was extraordinary. And when I say I would not have been able to make that work without her generosity. And so the Harriman board sort of extends the shadow of the future. It invests in its people so that you all can also go forward and do good work as well.
That's great. So Bennett, you're a pretty relatively recent intern and fellow. As someone who did this not that long ago, what would be some advice you have for students who want to be interns, or things that students should know before they go to intern?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I guess a first practical tip is when you're sort of putting that application together is think about the story about why you want to pursue the internship, pursue maybe a career in the foreign service. And talking with a lot of people in the foreign service or who work for the government, everyone really does have that sort of that story, that narrative, what brought them into the work that they really love to do. And I think that that story is really quite important. And so crafting that and spending a lot of time to think back to your own history, your family history, whatever it is that spark is really important. I think resonates a lot with those who actually will read your application. The second thing, and this is more for the Harriman side of the application, sort of after you've been selected as an intern, is really look at the history of who Pamela Harriman was. And I know Dianne kind of touched upon this a little bit, but she was a pretty fascinating person that lived through a incredibly dark period for some of her life in sort of world history, and sort of the connections and overlaps that she's had with sort of U.S. history and British history are truly fascinating. And I think there's sort of a sort of personality of resilience that comes through a lot when you kind of read some of her diaries and things like that. And Eric Larson, who's a pretty famous sort of author, has just came out with a great book that I read, I think probably almost just the month or two before applying, which was very helpful because I wasn't even sort of aware of that connection ahead of time. And so digging into Eric Larson's book or whoever it is, to sort of get a sense of who she was is pretty important as well.
Thank you. So we're gonna ask one more question and then we'll open it up to the group. Stephanie, as someone who sees thousands of students interested in this every year, what is something that students can do to help their applications stand out for the State Department?
Yeah, sure. Well, I think Bennett touched on it. He did a good job talking about sort of that personal motivation. I think that's really important. I think too is, finding a way to connect with the mission of the State Department and the work of the bureau or the office that you're aiming to work in, and say, what you'd bring to the table. Definitely, we want you to get something out of this internship, but of course, we're not completely selfless, and we want to integrate you into what we're doing, and we want to know a little bit about the skills and background that you bring to the table too, that makes you a good fit for that office. Because there is an overall committee that reviews the applications, but it's also the individuals out at the embassy or within the State Department in those offices that is ultimately selecting some of the interns based on what their needs are. So I would look and craft that personal statement carefully, and definitely talk to Andrew and have him look at it, and maybe talk to a few other mentors to have them take a look. And then finally, what I would also suggest is, or actually not finally, a few other ideas, but the dimensions. So Foreign Service officers are evaluated based on this set of dimensions. It's your base skill set you've been cultivating since birth. I don't think that anybody will expect you to enumerate on the dimensions in a short essay for that the internship application has, but look at those, think about them, think about your leadership skills, think about your cultural adaptability when you're crafting that essay and the rest of the dimensions. I think that's helpful, not just for the Foreign Service application, but for all the others that maybe you're applying to. It's just a core set of skills that you want to make sure you convey that you have. Then I would say, think about all the activities you've done. You might think that, one that doesn't touch on international relations isn't important to list, but list it. It could really signal something to somebody in your application. So don't self-select or screen out things just because they aren't international, or because you don't think they rise to the top. You've done a lot at school. You're involved in a lot. So make sure that those reviewing the applications know that. And then think about the impact that you want to have as an intern. And we, as I said, what motivated me in the Foreign Service and continues to is the ability to have an impact. So maybe give that some consideration as well.
Thank you. Okay, so everyone here is here for you guys. So we want to take some time to open up the floor for questions, questions about the process, the internships themselves, or their experiences. If you just want to raise your hand, and you can turn on your video and ask it yourself, or feel free to type it in the chat. But we're going to go ahead and open the floor for any questions from all of the students. Yeah, go ahead, Colin.
Hi, I had a question about the Foreign Service internship and the second year portion where you're going to be abroad. Do you have any sort of say in where you might end up, or is that completely random? And does it play into anything in your application or your skill set?
Well, like many things in the Foreign Service, it depends on the needs of the service. So at the time, it's really about the needs of the embassies overseas. So they will request interns. So you do in your application are able to reference a bureau, 2 bureaus or priority bureaus where you would like to be placed. So that offers, or embassies, so that offers you the opportunity to signal to the committee. The U.S. Foreign Service internship is, as a bit different, since it has those two components, one in Washington and one overseas. So you will have already been introduced to the State Department, and you will have points of contact. Be able to have some conversations the first summer. But it will depend on the needs of the service and the embassies that are requesting interns for those summers.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Are you required to be a citizen to apply to the Harriman Fellowship or any other Foreign Service internship, or is it permanent residency enough?
Just for the State Department internships, it's U.S. citizens only.
That's also the case for the Harriman Fellowship.
Yes, go as Isabel, please.
I guess this is more for Dr. Grimm and Bennett. How would you say that your time at William and Mary kind of prepared you for the internship and the fellowship? Like, what things did you learn that you were able to apply in those different settings?
Isabel, I think that is such a good question. And can I answer both with how I was prepared and how I was not prepared? So I think the hallmark of every William and Mary student is intellectual curiosity. And I think that sort of insatiable intellectual curiosity is very valued, not just at the State Department, but I think across the range of places that I've worked and interned. And so I think the ability to think critically, problem solving, the ability to really take a puzzle and try to understand all sides of it. I would also say the ability to take initiative, which was cultivated at William and Mary. And I think as an intern, it is such an important skill, right? To recognize what the office's needs are and then to meet those needs and go above and beyond. Let me say how I was not prepared. So Isabel, let me throw a question back to you. What was the shortest paper you wrote this past year? Do you remember, or have you blacked it out? I like that you're like looking up, like, what was the shortest paper that I wrote?
I think it was
Truly.
5 pages. I would say that's the
Yeah,
shortest.
yeah. So here's how I was not prepared, which is that by the time I went to the Harriman, and I see Stephanie smiling because I feel like she knows what I'm going to say. I was very good at banging out a 10 to 12 page paper. Can I just see a quick show of hands? Who also has a great skill of banging out a 10 to 12 page paper? I think all of you. Do you know what's not really read or valued? A 10 to 12 page paper. So I think the number one skill that I really wished that I had was the ability to write clearly, concisely, in the bottom line up front format, briefly. So I think what was quite surprising to me is I'm like, I'm a really good researcher, I'm a really good writer. Yes, I was great at writing a 12-page paper. I was not great at writing 400 words or 150 words. And so now for all of my undergrad and grad classes at Georgetown, the paper assignments every week range between 150 words and 600 words, with the idea being sometimes the principal will only read the first sentence, which was a hard thing for me to grasp as a William and Mary student. I wrote in a sort of like murder mystery way in which I had the aha at the final sentence, which is not how you need to write in the government because it's not a murder mystery. But so I think all of those skills that you have already cultivated, right? Critical thinking, problem solving, intellectual curiosity, initiative, those are the primary skills that you need. Any classes that you can take, and I cannot stress this enough, that hone your writing and your analytical ability will pay you dividends, no matter where you work in the public, private, or nonprofit sector. But for me, that adaptation of writing short, and I do mean when I worked in the Intel community, most of what I wrote maybe was about 200 words. So about 2 paragraphs-ish for presidential daily briefs. And that is a big adjustment to make. But I'll turn it over to Bennett.
Yeah, I think the biggest sort of, I guess the coolest thing about William & Mary is how many different organizations are plugged in already to international relations, international events, foreign policy, diplomacy, and the GRI. Of course, I have to give a plug for the GRI. I mean, it is truly incredible how many places you'll go, and you'll see GRI research being cited and referenced, and just knowing that what data is available and what research opportunities are available as a student is like going to give you miles, sort of put you miles ahead of other students who might be interested in the same subjects, but then not have the background in sort of research rigor and know where the databases are located and things like that. And when you go into sort of write, your application or your brief or whatever it is, you already have the resources that are just right there. You know how to access them, and it's pretty cool because you just come in knowing more than maybe some other candidates. So I think that is definitely really cool. But so many organizations, I mean, Reeves, GRI, whole of government. There's so many resources on campus that are just super plugged in, and that's really not available everywhere to every college student. Sort of. So that's pretty special.
Any other questions? Yes, please, Lily.
I think this has already started to be answered, but I'm an incoming freshman, and the foreign service internships sound really interesting to me. But I wanted to know, as I'm getting started on campus, how I can find opportunities to eventually ease myself into those interests, because right now there's nothing on my resume that would indicate an interest in foreign service or national security.
Well, I can take that a little bit. So I did touch upon the Global Research Institute. That would be the number one place to start. But then I would also highlight the VSFS internship that Stephanie mentioned. So I did that my freshman year. And it's a really cool opportunity because you can do it while, on top of your normal coursework. Your sort of supervisors are totally understanding that your academics totally come first. But it gave me sort of a year of supporting the Department of State ahead of applying for, the fuller Foreign Service internship and Harriman Fellowship and all that. And that is pretty awesome experience. Those positions are really tailored to a specific office, so you know what you're signing up for. And there are some really, really cool opportunities across sort of the board each year. And it goes on for the entire academic year. And so you get to see a full year of projects and sort of papers or memos or whatever your office is working on. And you just get a really good understanding of sort of a day in the life of in my case, someone who works in the Greening Diplomacy Initiative at the Department of State, which is really, really quite cool. So I would say check that opportunity out and send something in.
Thank you. You just did my job for me. I'm so grateful. I was going to say the same thing. Yes, the VSFS internship is open to any year. So freshman, sophomore, junior, senior application cycle will open in February. And again, as Bennett said, it's just a unique opportunity. The platform allows us as hiring managers to put in so much detail about what the internship will entail. So it really gives you an opportunity to apply for something that you're passionate about working on and explore an interest that you have. So I definitely recommend doing that. It's really a cool program.
Can I also just say one word, Lily? Anything can show an interest in IR, and you are just starting out. And so read a ton. If you're interested, I have a list that I send to my freshmen in Intro to International Relations of podcasts that you should read, books, short form journalism, long form journalism, because part of these next couple of years is just figuring out, what are you interested in? At Georgetown is Jesuit, right? We're not public. And the hallmark of a Jesuit education is figuring out what bothers you. So in addition to sort of where your skills and strengths are, what bothers you? What's a reading that you did that really stuck with you and really sort of, asked questions? For papers that you can choose whatever topic to write, pick a region of the world you might not know that much about, or a topic that maybe you heard about an NPR story and wanted to follow up on. And all of that can be international relations. When I went abroad for my entire junior year, I had to get my passport to go. I had never left the country before, right? And now I teach international relations. This is what I spend my life's work on. So you're just starting out, and that's great. But pay attention to what bothers you. Think about when you're reading what really sort of strikes a chord.
And Lily, when you come to campus here in the next couple weeks, please come by the Reeves Center and visit us. At the Reeves Center, we host all sorts of events like this one. We bring speakers to campus. We talk about internships. We talk about experiences. We host competitions, all sorts of stuff that all kind of relate to this topic. We also run the study abroad programs, which also can relate to this. So please come by and visit us, and we'll make sure to introduce you to everyone. So we have time for about one more question. Do I have one more student that has a question? So Megan, go ahead.
Yeah, for Dr. Grimm and for Bennett, I know you were in Paris and London respectively. What was something that you wish you would have known before your internship, both summers and specifically when you were abroad?
Something I wish I would have known. Well, I watched Lance Armstrong win the Tour de France that year from the US Embassy building, and I wish I hadn't bought a Lance Armstrong t-shirt. That would have been a foresight that I wished. What I wish I had known. I wish I had known that it's okay to ask for help. because I think we exist in a sort of warrior culture in which you're supposed to display always that you know the answer and you know what to do and you shouldn't ask for help. And I think that we tell ourselves that asking for help is a sign of weakness. And I wish I had asked for help more, both because I had been studying abroad before I did the internship and then at my internship. I wish that I had reached out to more people to ask for assistance and had reframed it as not a sign of weakness, but rather a sign of sort of recognizing other people's long career arcs. Every FSO that I worked with was so happy to talk about what their careers had been, why they joined the State Department, but I wish I had reached out more. I think I waited later in my career to start to build my mentorship network, and I should have started earlier.
Yeah, I think along similar lines, maybe when you're just starting out in that internship, you might be pretty nervous. There's everyone just kind of is doing their day-to-day business and they bring you into those calls and you come in with like no background knowledge or, situational awareness of what everyone's doing, but you're just on that Monday call and you're like, whoa, what am I like jumping into? And so that could kind of be a little nerve-wracking for the first bit. Um, and that may sort of, put you in a position where like, okay, I gotta show that I'm, on top of things and not, asking too many questions. But that's really the wrong mindset because everyone knows when you're coming in that you don't have any of that background knowledge. And so if you don't ask the questions, then it's more of like, oh, well, you know, eh, maybe this person's not as interested or as engaged. So I think when you show up, it's like delve into rapid fire questions, and speak to as many people as possible, and really just come in with the understanding that everyone there brought you to the internship to support you and support your career and support your studies, and it's treated as a learning experience, and reach out to people all across the department and be deliberate from day one on thinking like, who here do I really want to talk to, because there are so many really cool jobs, and fascinating people with incredible backgrounds who've lived all over the world, and so kind of going in with that mindset and being open-minded, and willing to be a little bit vulnerable in that first like bit there is, I think, pretty important.
Awesome. Well, I just want to thank all of the panelists. Thank you so much for spending this time with us this afternoon. As everyone's applying and wanting to know more information, everyone put their emails in the chat. Please feel free to reach out. If you have any questions, you can email Dianne or myself at the Reeves Center at any time. We're here to help you. As you're working on your applications, please reach out to Andrew in the Cohen Career Center. Him and the whole staff over there are such a great resource, and they're here to help you. So thank you. Please don't be a stranger, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.